Anime, Japan's multi-billion-dollar entertainment empire, known for its expansive plotlines, crazy characters, and over-the-top intros. With its success, it should be no surprise that Denmark's multi-billion-dollar plastic brick empire LEGO wants a piece of the anime pie. A One Piece, perhaps. Throughout its history, LEGO has tried to enter this market a few times, with 3 distinct themes that I think get the closest to representing the art form. And in this video, I'm going to be taking each of these themes and representing them with a giant mech, in my ongoing mission to recreate every single LEGO theme in mech form. So for the first of our 3 anime mechs, I'm going to be looking into LEGO's most recent theme at the time of making this video, and that theme is none other than the one and only And before all of you come for my head saying, "It's based on the live action, not the anime!" I watched the full live action show as well as the anime up to where the first season of the live action ends, because no, I am not watching all 1138 episodes of One Piece for a stupid LEGO video. Are you joking? And anyway, I think the LEGO sets do a pretty good job in representing both, because LEGO is inherently cartoony, so it probably fits the anime better. But enough about semantics. What even is this show? One Piece follows a ragtag group of pirates known as the Straw Hats, sailing the Grand Line in search for a treasure known as the One Piece, facing many adventures and enemies along the way. They are led by their captain, Monkey D. Luffy, who I'm basing this mech on. Luffy has one dream.
I'm gonna be king of the pirates!
And I don't know about you, but I reckon that would be a lot easier if you're utilizing a mech. So let's build him one. Of course I had to build Luffy's mech in his most iconic outfit from the show, and that starts with his feet, where he's wearing sandals. The colour that LEGO uses for Luffy's skin tone is called Nougat, which doesn't have a massive variety of normal bricks available, which is kind of shown in the bottom of his legs having these really boxy shape. They also block off the posability of the feet, meaning the mech can't stand up straight, hence the black pieces under his feet, but I'll show you later on why that isn't really a problem. Moving up the legs, we get to Luffy's shorts, with a printed piece on the front which came from a Harry Potter brickhead set. You may notice on the joint I'm using sand blue. That's so I can attach these claw pieces to kind of give a ripped jean effect, which I think is actually quite effective. And then the rest of the shorts are built up quite simply with Nexonite tiles. Now we move into the torso, which is where I came across a problem. Each of the One Piece sets contained mystery wanted posters. The more expensive the set, the more posters you got. In total there was 8 posters to collect, but I only wanted 1, Monkey D. Luffy. So to give myself the best chance at that tile, I bought 3 of the new sets, which would give me a total of 9 tiles. And surely I'd get Luffy in one of them. I did not. In fact, I got every single other character in the collection except the one I wanted. Which is why I have to give a massive shout out to the Minifig Who for trading me one of his Luffy tiles. Because without it, I'd have to wait for these to start popping up on Bricklink, or spend £270 on a Baratier.
Oh my god!
And you can see it was a pretty instrumental part to the mock. But anyway, we put Luffy in there, and this contraption round the back using these Technic lift arms, which is how we're going to attach our straw hat. And I know Luffy's already wearing a straw hat on his minifigure, but it's such an important part of the character, I felt like I had to include it in quite a significant way. I've also started the arms using these mudguard pieces, before more of those same boxy slopes I used on the legs. Now, one of the most important parts of Luffy's character is the fact that he's a rubber man. This basically means he can stretch any part of his body, Mr. Fantastic style. And I really wanted to represent that within this mech, so I kind of just doubled the length of his arms. It's actually supposed to be triple the length, but every time I tried it on the turntable, it just didn't quite work out. So whilst this is how I'll have Luffy on display in my personal collection, you'll see him with the double length. You can also see that because I put the hat on lift arms, it means it can actually be lifted up over the top of Luffy's head, so it gives the look like he's wearing it. It looks absolutely ridiculous, I'll be completely honest. I really like the shaping of the hat, but I think I do like it better on his back. But you can also see that the hands I've built for Luffy are very wide. That's so that he can support himself purely just on the weight of the arms. It looks a lot more effective when the arms are longer and you can see a bit more of a gap beneath the feet, but that's basically why those black stands didn't really matter. They were never going to be there in the finished product. But there's my finished One Piece mech. Before the sets were revealed, I had no idea what One Piece was, so it was really fun culminating all I know about One Piece into this mech. Is the One Piece real? Who knows? But this mech certainly is. Whew, this one's going to be awkward. Avatar: The Last Airbender is not an anime. I genuinely thought it was. I don't have an explanation as to why, but by the time I actually bothered to look it up, I was way too far gone. The mech had already been built and had already started editing the video. And let's just be clear, when I'm talking about Avatar, I am not talking about this, and I am definitely not talking about this monstrosity. Yes, in 2006, LEGO released 2 sets based on the Avatar show. It was put into a competition against SpongeBob to see which theme would sell more sets. SpongeBob won, and Avatar was never heard from again. Which I think's a real shame because the LEGO Avatar sets we did get were not good. I've seen Duplo sets less blocky than that Fire Nation shit. So let's see if one of my mechs can fill that Avatar shaped hole in our LEGO hearts. And again, you don't count. Of course, for the Avatar mech, we're going to build the Avatar himself, Aang, who is without a doubt the least cursed minifigure that came from this theme. Honestly, some of those face prints were absolute nightmare fuel. And I think for the first time ever on this channel, I'm not starting with the legs. Instead of just doing a big upscale of the minifigure, I want Aang to be using all 4 elements within this mech. The first one that he masters is air, so we start with that, using these cloud pieces that were mainly found in Monkey Kid sets. Then throughout book 1, Aang learns water bending, which I represented using this fairly basic brick bending technique, but I did it with 3 different colours to kind of create a nice gradient, making a big crashing tidal wave. Then Aang learns how to earth bend in book 2, and I represented that in brick form by building big chunks of rock out of dark tan and medium nougat bricks, and attaching them together with some clear bars, so they give a kind of floating effect. Before the final element that Aang learns, which is fire, which was probably the simplest to recreate, just using these old Chima pieces on a big Technic frame. But with that done, you can see all the elements are there, but there isn't a mech, so let's start that. Now this may look like a very strange starting point for one of my mechs, with the legs facing a horizontal from the body, but that's because I've come up with quite an interesting idea for the pose of this mech. I kind of want Aang to be in like this meditation pose, almost as if he's going into the Avatar state. I think it'll just make him stand out a bit more. And I know these legs should technically be folded, but the joints just didn't stretch that far, so this will have to do. But I'm pretty happy with how detailed they are. Of course, I then had to add on the torso and the arms. You may notice when looking around the back that the arms actually start a bit further out from the body than they normally do. That was really the only way to give them enough posability so that once the hands are added, they can touch each other. I haven't talked too much about the actual detailing on this mech because it's kind of what you see is what you get. It's mainly just built out of curved slopes and wedges in yellow and orange to represent Aang's robes. But you can see with the hands added on there, it does create that pose that I wanted, and I also thought it would be fun to add some capes to kind of represent the top bit of Aang's outfit, even if they're just a little bit too short. But with that, the mech's done, so let's add on all our other elements to show the final model. I think this is a really fun representation of the show in the mech. I know people have complained about me before about how my mechs are not very posable. This is not going to help my case, but I really like the final look. It gives me the vibe of the last episode where he's using all 4 elements at the same time to take on the Fire Lord. That's kind of the inspiration I took here. And although it may not be a great anime mech, it's a good mech nonetheless. For our last mech, we're sticking in 2006, looking at the theme LEGO Exo Force. Now, I know, again, this isn't based on an actual anime, but it clearly takes heavy inspiration. The insane facial expressions, the mangas found on the box art and instruction books, And my god, those hair pieces. I think it may have the most mech per capita ratio out of any LEGO theme in existence. It's honestly ridiculous. It entirely centers around the Exo Force, a team of mech pilots, or as they call them, battle machines, defending against an army of robots. This theme is incredibly nostalgic to me. Owning Sentai Fortress as a child is one of my biggest flexes, and that's just one of the many iconic sets from this theme. Last year we did get an homage to Exo Force in the form of this city set, which featured a very dumbed down version of Stealth Hunter, one of the most iconic Exo Force sets, but using much more modern pieces. And that gave me the idea to take one of the robot mechs from the original theme and build it in a similar style to this. I decided to go with the Fire Vulture mech because I like the color scheme of it, and that turbine on the back is so iconic to Exo Force for me, I just had to include it somewhere. The villains for the Exo Force theme are so nostalgic. Those arm and hand pieces were originally introduced for these robots and are still seen in tons of sets today. Those arms are what I use for half of my mech's fingers. The feet are built out of dark blue and dark grey, which most of this mech is going to be, with a little bit of dark tan to highlight in there as well. The legs use my standard mech joint, which is the same that was used in that city set, and you can see there's some clips at the top holding the legs into place. Those are detailed with some dark tan dishes on the actual knee joint, which I'm using to represent the joints that were found in the old set, except those were a bit more posable. Around the back is some boosters to give it a bit more aerial advantage, and then I finished up the legs with a bit more greebling, including some fins on the side, some telephone pieces, darkened sand blue slopes on the thighs, and these stickered shin guards, because I can't help myself to pack detail wherever I can. You'll notice on the top I'm not using my classic cockpit piece, instead building the entire thing sideways and attaching it with a bracket. You'll also notice that the arms look a bit weird. They're not being attached by ball joints, instead using these 2x4 rounded tiles, which I've put on top of a modified tile to allow them to move around. Again, it really constricts posability, but I think really works for the style of mech I'm going for. You'll also see I put the minifigure in there. He's armoured up with these two stickered panels that reflect any light that's pointed at it. And then around the back there's this very interesting clear piece. More on that later, but it's time to give this mech some weaponry, including these two big cannons on the top. They're actually built using the metal beard piece, which came in dark blue in this random Ninjago dragon to represent its jaw, and I just love using weird parts like that. And then you can see those top wing sections are extended using some nice stickered pieces, as well as the arms, which have tons of greebling, including some dark blue lightsaber hilts. I've attached pieces at the bottom there which can actually take on some ball joints, so the arms do have some kind of posability. And on top of there I've chucked the weapons, a big claw hand on the left and a giant flamethrower on the right, which has a big clear tube attached to that mystery piece. I've also added on some shoulder armor and the flame onto the gun, and the mech's done, not forgetting of course the giant turbine around the back. And it perfectly blocks off how undetailed the backside of this mech was, so that's pretty good as well. But what was that mystery piece around the back? Well, a lot of the early Exo Force mechs came with light bricks that when pushed can light up the tubes to the weapon. The feature didn't work great, but when you turn off the lights, I made it so that when you push in the center of the turbine, the light switches on. Again, it's quite weak. It doesn't quite make it the entire way to the weapon, but it wasn't something I could leave off an Exo Force mech. But there you have it, my version of Fire Vulture in the style of the LEGO City Exo Force mechs. It was an interesting challenge to basically blend two pre-existing mechs and smash them together, but I really like the outcome. It's a lot more girthy than the actual Fire Vulture is, but I love how armoured up and detailed it is. And I know a lot of people don't like stickers, but I think the stickers really add to this one. Exo Force was almost like Speed Champions in how many stickers it has. But that's the third mech of the video. Let's put them all together and wrap this up. And there you have it, my 3 anime mechs. Although only one of them is really based on an anime. Let's just call it anime inspired. Hopefully that'll stop the oncoming horde of hate comments. So instead of leaving me one of those, tell me which of these 3 is your favourite. I think for me I'm probably gonna have to go with Exo Force, but nostalgia's playing a heavy role on that. Also make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next mech video, which has a slight connection to one of these 3. But until then, bon voyage. That is what they say in Japan, right?